The galactic consensus had a problem, and its designation was Sol. 3. For 5 standard cycles, the analytical engines of the consensus had processed every scrap of data from the human world: economic outputs, military deployments, political speeches, resource consumption. The conclusion was absolute, a mathematical certainty. Faced with the consensus's overwhelming demonstration of force and the logical, profit-driven framework of their splintered nation-states, humanity would capitulate. They would sign the Annexation Accord, becoming a client species under consensus stewardship. Resistance was statistically null. It did not compute. The Voran emissary, a being of crystalline facets and cold light, observed the landing site from the lead ship's viewport. The human delegation approached across the scorched earth of what they called the Kazakh steppe. The Voran had chosen this location for its symbolic emptiness, a place of no significant emotional or strategic value according to their models. The humans, however, had insisted on bringing a small, wheeled vehicle. They bring a primitive conveyance, the tactical logic mind pulsed via thought impulse, a display of technological inferiority, perhaps to elicit condescension. Irrelevant.com. The human group was a mix of their political leaders and military advisors, faces grim. Standard, but their attention kept flicking to the vehicle, a battered truck with a sealed container on its bed. The Voran sensors identified organic matter within. Non-human, non-threatening. A pet, perhaps? An emotional support creature. The model updated. A minor attempt to project domesticity, to appear less militant. Predictable. The formalities were brief. The Voran emissary extended a light tendril, projecting the accord into the air. The terms are optimal. The emissary vocalized in perfectly toned English. Your integration is inevitable. Resistance results in termination. Sign, and your species is preserved. The human leader, a weary-looking man with the title of Secretary General, stepped forward. He did not look at the holographic document. Instead, he said, "Before we discuss your document, we would like to offer a gift, a gesture of goodwill." A spike of discordant data hit the Voran collective mind. Gift-giving ritual. Pre-negotiation custom. Low-impact deviation. The model adjusted. Tolerance parameters wide. Proceed, the emissary intoned. From the truck, 2 soldiers carefully lowered the container. They opened it, and out stepped not a creature of diplomacy, but a shaggy, brown-coated quadruped with gentle eyes. A cow, a common terrestrial bovine. It lowed softly, swishing its tail at the flies. The Voran analytical subprocessor's word. Biological specimen. Agricultural utility. 0 tactical value. Ritual offering of sustenance, possibly poisoned. Scans returned negative. It was just a cow. Then an old human, not a soldier or politician, but a man in simple clothes, stepped from behind the delegation. He walked to the cow, placed a gnarled hand on its flank, and looked directly at the Voran emissary. His eyes were not fearful. They were filled with a profound, unsettling sorrow. "This," the old man said, his voice cracking, "is Bella. She was born in a field in Galway. She has a name. She knows the sound of my voice. She comes when I call. She likes her ears scratched. Right here." He demonstrated. The cow leaned into his touch. The logic mind was bombarded with conflicting data. Sentimental attachment to food source livestock. Economically irrational. Socially aberrant. The model attempted to categorize the act as a performance, but the biometrics of the old man, micro-expressions, pheromonal discharge, vocal stress, aligned with genuine attachment. It was a useless, inefficient emotional display. The Secretary General spoke again, his voice quiet, but carrying. "You have analyzed our weapons, our armies, our politics. But did your engines calculate this? For this man, and for millions like him, this creature is not a resource unit. She is family. She is a story. You cannot annex a story." The emissary's facets dimmed in confusion. "This is irrelevant data. The creature is biomass. Your emotional categorization does not alter its objective status, nor the strategic balance of power." "Doesn't it?" asked the Secretary General. He nodded to the old man, who led Bella back to the truck. "You have failed to predict our first decision. We reject your accord, not because we can win, but because we choose what we love over what is logical. You cannot understand that. That is your weakness." A wave of cold certainty washed from the tactical logic mind. Negotiation failed. Proceed to punitive demonstration. The emissary raised a tendril. Then you choose termination. Your orbital installations will be destroyed in 3 of your minutes. A demonstration. As the Voron ship's energy cannons began powering, a new signal blared across every frequency. A crude, powerful audio-video broadcast from the human lunar colony. It showed not missile silos or warships, but a child's drawing of the Earth and the Moon, held in a smudged hand. A young voice, trembling but clear, said, "Please don't hurt my home." The tactical logic mind dismissed it as psychological warfare, but the content was illogical. The plea held no leverage, no threat, only vulnerability. For a nanosecond, the vast interconnected processing power of the consensus hesitated, trying to force this square, emotional data into the round holes of logical prediction. In that nanosecond, they failed to notice the silent activation of hundreds of buried kinetic projectors on Mars, weapons their models had labeled abandoned mining launches, weapons aimed not at the Voron Armada, but at the barren asteroids of the belt. The humans, it seemed, had made another emotional decision: to hide their best weapons in plain sight, and to fire them only when the enemy was looking the other way. The kinetic strikes from Mars were not targeted at the Voron fleet. They were a calculated act of celestial chaos, hammering into the dense asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter. The consensus tactical models, focused on direct energy weapon engagements and fleet maneuvers, had classified the human Mars installations as derelict. The models had failed to account for patience, for a decades-long project, built not for immediate defense, but for a single desperate gambit. The result was an avalanche of stone and iron. 1 trillion tons of rubble was sent cascading inward, a shotgun blast of planetary debris on a rough intercept course with the Voron fleet's orbital positions around Earth. It was not a precise weapon. It was a battlefield smokescreen written in mountain-sized rock, a wall of chaos that disrupted targeting systems, threatened collisions, and forced the Voron ships to scatter and engage evasive protocols. On Earth, in a buried command center, General Alicia Kader watched the tactical hollow. Her face was granite. "They're moving, just as the Murphy twins predicted." End of Murphy twins. Derek and Sonia were not traditional tacticians. They were xenopsychologists and historical statisticians, a discipline the Voron had no equivalent for. Their thesis was simple: a purely logical enemy could be herded by exploiting its inability to process irrationality. The Voron would see the asteroid scatter as a tactical obstacle, not a feint. They would prioritize navigational safety and re-establishing optimal firing solutions. They would, for a crucial window, focus on the physical threat and ignore the silent one. "Launch the chorus," Kader ordered. Across the planet, in deep bunkers shielded from orbital scans, hatches opened. What ascended were not missiles, but thousands of modified civilian rockets, weather balloons, and high-altitude drones. Each carried a payload not of explosives, but of transmitters broadcasting on every conceivable frequency. And they broadcast everything. The raw, uncensored emotional torrent of a panicked, defiant, grieving, hopeful planet. Not official statements, but the noise of humanity. The cries from hospital nurseries, the furious shouts from protest marches, the solemn prayers from temples, the ragged singing from bomb shelters, the chaotic din of talk radio, the desperate pleas and loving words exchanged over last known open lines. It was a tsunami of unstructured, meaningless, vital human emotion, compressed and blasted directly at the Voron fleet. To the consensus mind, it was a data weapon of unprecedented virulence. Their systems, designed for efficient communication and tactical analysis, were inundated with petabytes of irrational, contradictory, emotionally charged noise. Priority channels jammed with a baby's wail. Threat assessment algorithms tried to pass the strategic value of a man sobbing over a lost wedding ring. Social cohesion models shattered attempting to find the governing logic in a million simultaneous dissonant songs. The Voron ship's efficiency dropped by 48% in seconds. The emissary aboard the flagship felt its crystalline thought processes cloud, facets flickering with aberrant color. This is noise. Purge the feeds. But the human chorus was designed to be invasive, adaptive, and relentless. It found cracks in firewalls exploiting the Voron's own predictive protocols. They had anticipated military codes, not a recording of a Tibetan throat-singing choir or the screams from a soccer stadium. On the lunar colony, Director Aris Thorne watched the main Varan fleet's confused movements. The asteroid field was doing its job, and the chorus was causing systemic paralysis. But the logic mind would adapt. It would begin filtering, identifying the attack as mere psychological interference. It was time for the third and most irrational move. Open the private channel to the Voron flagship, Thorne said. The one they gave us for surrender negotiations. The link established. Thorne appeared on the emissary's viewport, calm. Behind him was not a war room, but the lunar hydroponics bay, lush with green plants under artificial suns. Emissary, your models are failing. You are trying to drink an ocean of data you have no vessels for. We wish to parley. The emissary's form pulsed with agitated light. You assault us with irrationality. This changes nothing. We will filter your noise and reduce your cities to glass. Perhaps, Thorne conceded. But first I have a request. A single personal query. This is irrelevant. Indulge me. It is a custom, a question of cultural exchange. The logic mind, still struggling to isolate the chorus signal, saw an opportunity. This directed communication was a data point, a return to structured interaction. It could be analyzed. Permit the query. Thorne took a deep breath. My question is this. Do you have a word, a concept, for the light of a star that has already died, but which still travels to you across the emptiness? The ghost of a warmth that is already gone? The emissary froze. The question was nonsensical. It was astrophysics mingled with poetic metaphor. It was a query about observed phenomena contaminated with subjective, emotional framing. The consensus language had words for extinct stellar light, but they were technical descriptors. The concept Thorne described, the melancholy, the beauty, the existential loneliness wrapped within the fact, was alien, more alien than humanity itself. The phenomenon is stellar echo. The emotional context is irrelevant, the emissary stated. But a flaw had formed in its certainty. The human was not bargaining, not threatening. He was asking about ghosts. Thorne smiled, a sad, soft smile. To us, it is not irrelevant. We call it memory. We are creatures of memory, emissary. We fight for memories. We build for memories yet to be made. You tried to calculate our future, but you never understood our past. That is why you will lose. Not to our weapons, but to our ghosts. He cut the channel. The emissary was left in silence, but the silence was now filled with the phantom echoes of the human's question. It was a cognitive virus, far more targeted than the chorus. It forced a single illogical thought into the heart of the logical mind. Across the fleet, the tactical logic mind issued the order to begin filtering the emotional broadcast and to target the launch sites of the chorus projectiles. It was a rational response, but it was exactly what the Murphy twins had predicted. The entire fleet, for a span of 90 seconds, focused its sensors and point defenses on the atmospheric clutter of balloons and drones descending over Earth. It completely missed the silent activation of the buried railgun network on the Moon, hidden in plain sight within mining trenches. They had been labelled as industrial mass drivers, and they were. But their industrial payloads were not ore. They were slugs of tungsten, accelerated to a fraction of light speed. The lunar railguns fired not at the fleet, but at the debris field the humans had created. They struck specific, pre-calculated asteroids, not breaking them, but altering their trajectories with precise nuclear-tipped blows. The chaotic cloud of rubble suddenly gained a sinister, convergent pattern. It coalesced into a handful of coherent, massive streams. Not a shotgun blast, but a spear thrust. The Voron threat detection systems screamed a belated warning. The emissary watched as the new trajectories painted themselves across the tactical hollow. The streams were going to miss the flagship. They were going to miss all the major warships. They were on a perfect collision course with the Voron fleet's logistic and support vessels, the unarmed fuel tankers, the troop carriers, the command and relay nodes, the pieces of the fleet that were logically kept at the rear, away from the danger of direct combat. The humans hadn't aimed for the teeth. They had aimed for the throat. Silence, cold and absolute, replaced the cacophony of the chorus. The human transmissions had ceased as abruptly as they began. In the void, the only sounds were the electromagnetic screams of tearing metal and venting atmosphere as the streamlined asteroid streams found their marks. The Voron support fleet died not in glory, but in pragmatic, brutal efficiency. Fuel depots detonated in chain reactions, painting the dark with brief, ugly suns. Troop carriers holding 500,000 consensus ground force drones shattered into spinning tombs. The central relay node, the hive mind's local synaptic center, flickered and went dark, severing the low-latency connection between the warships. They were still a powerful armada, but they were now blind in one eye, their movements becoming marginally less coordinated, their reactions a critical fraction slower. On the Voron flagship, the emissary felt the disconnection, like a physical amputation. The constant, soothing hum of the full consensus mind was gone, replaced by the hollow echo of the ship's isolated logic core. The tactical display was a tragedy of errors. Every human action had been a misdirection. The cow, the noise, the poetic question, all of it was layers of irrational chaff hiding a single, devastatingly logical strike. They understood our logic better than we understood their illogic. The emissary pulsed to the ship's captain, its light dim. On Earth, General Kada allowed herself one tight smile. Phase 3 complete. Now we give them the choice. A new, clean, directed transmission went out to the flagship. Kada's face appeared. No nonsense. Emissary, you have witnessed our capability. You have witnessed our strategy. You are now isolated. Your support gone. Your fuel limited. You retain the power to glass our cities. We acknowledge this. If you do, we cannot stop you. She paused, letting the stark admission hang in the vacuum. But if you do, we will not target your remaining warships. Our final command already given is that every remaining weapon we have, every missile, every railgun, every clandestine ship in the outer system, will be aimed at your logistics trail, at the automated supply depots you have positioned in the Oort cloud, at the navigation beacons you laid across the interstellar gulf. We will obliterate your path home. We will strand you here in a system that hates you, with no way back and no way forward. You will win the battle and inherit a tomb. It was a move of pure, spiteful insanity. From a logical, resource-based perspective, it made no sense. Once Earth was gone, human extinction was certain. Why waste final actions on a meaningless vengeance? Why not try to bargain, to survive? The Voron model shattered, trying to process it. The emissary responded, its voice lacking its former certainty. This is irrational. It provides no tactical advantage to your species post-termination. We know, Kada said, her eyes hard. We call it a legacy. It is the story we leave behind. The story that a species called humanity would rather die than be slaves, and would make sure their jailers shared their cage. The next species you meet will hear that story. They will know you can be hurt. They will know you can be stranded. Your perfect, logical consensus will forever have to factor in the possibility of irrational, total defiance. The calculus of conquest just got infinitely more expensive. The emissary consulted the isolated logic core. The projection was clear. A punitive strike was still overwhelmingly likely to succeed. Earth's major population centers could be eliminated. But the human threat was not idle. Their remaining assets, scattered and hidden, could plausibly target the long, vulnerable line of communication back to the consensus core worlds. The probability of stranding the fleet was 32%. Logically, That risk was unacceptable for a punitive action. The core mandate was species preservation and expansion, not Pyrrhic vengeance. But there was more. The logic core, contaminated by the earlier emotional data, presented a new, horrifying variable. If humanity was this unpredictably emotional in its strategy, what would it be like as a client species? Could they be governed? Would they obey? Or would they, at some illogical moment, sabotage a world's power grid because of a poem, or poison a food supply over a moral outrage about a creature like Bella? The cost-benefit analysis of annexing humanity flipped from positive to catastrophically negative. The emissary made its decision. It was not a decision the full consensus would have ever made. It was a decision born of isolation, of shock, and of the first faint glimmer of something the Vorin had no name for: fear of the unknown. "We will withdraw," the emissary stated. "A quarantine beacon will be placed in this system. It will warn all. This world is illogical. It is a carnivore that pretends to be grass. It is too dangerous to consume and too resilient to easily eradicate. You are marked as a feral zone." Kada nodded. "We understand. We will not interfere with your withdrawal, but know this: if your beacon ever stops transmitting, if you ever return, we will not be where you left us. And we will remember." The Vorin fleet, humbled and wounded, turned its prow from the blue-green world. As they entered the void, the emissary looked back one last time. It saw not a planet of strategic value, but a puzzle wrapped in an illusion, hiding a trap inside an enigma. They had come for resources and found a mirror that showed them the terrifying void in their own perfect logic. Years later, on the reconstructed lunar colony, Director Thorne stood with the now-retired Murphy twins, watching Earth rise. The quarantine beacon, a silent Vorin monolith, orbited at the system's edge. "Do you think they understood?" Sonia Murphy asked, sipping tea. "They understood enough to leave," Thorne said. "They'll add human emotional decision-making as a catastrophic variable in their models. They'll probably spend centuries trying to formalize it." Derek Murphy chuckled. "Good luck. We can't even predict it ourselves. That's the point." On Earth, in a green field in Galway, an old man scratched the ear of a cow, the descendant of a cow named Bella. He looked up at the stars, not with fear, but with a quiet defiance. They had not been saved by being smarter or stronger. They had been saved by being gloriously and